I'd like to start with a poem that I think really represents some of the experience of traveling through survivorship. And it's called How to Climb a Mountain by Maya Stein. Make no mistake, this will be an exercise in staying vertical. Yes, there will be a view, later a wide swath of open sky, but in the meantime, tree and stone. If you're lucky, a hawk will coast overhead, scanning the forest floor. If you're lucky, a set of wildflowers will keep you cheerful. Mostly, though, a steady sweat, your heart fluttering indelicately, a solid ache perforating your calves. This is called work. What you will come to know eventually and simply as movement, as all the evidence you need to make your way. Forget where you were. That story is no longer true. Level your gaze to the trail you're on, and even the dark won't stop you. And that's Maya Stein, How to Climb a Mountain. So let's start looking, what is survivorship exactly? It's a term that's used, but what is it? I'd like to go through some of the definitions that happened in 1985 when physician and also cancer survivor himself, Dr. Fitzhugh Mullins, coined the term the seasons of survivorship. He had as the first season what he called acute survivorship. Mullins had it that survivorship began right at diagnosis. So acute survivorship, in his terms, means initial diagnosis, going through the treatment, having to hit the ground running, oftentimes not knowing what we're doing, being shocked, and still having to put one foot in front of the next. And I think for all of us, it's a very confusing time, it's a scary time, and again, it's a shocking time. So that oftentimes it feels like you don't even really know what you're doing or where you're going, and the direction is very, very confusing. However, what's also true about this particular phase of a cancer diagnosis is that for most, it's a clear-cut path. Not for all. I don't want to make this one size fits all because it certainly is not. But for most, it's like, all right, here's the treatment. Here's what you're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. So there is a sense during that time of some level of a plan, some level, even ironically, of some control that you're actually doing something with the diagnosis you've been given. It's a very busy time and again, a very confusing time. And then, bam, treatment is over. And again, this is Mullins' viewpoint. And you go into what he calls extended survivorship. By extended survivorship, what Mullins means is that phase now, well, okay, you finished treatment, or you are someone who is living with cancer, maybe you will be in treatment for the rest of your life or for a period of time. During this time, you have the watch and see period. You have your scans, you have your appointments, you have your follow-ups. Oftentimes, we're still being listened to, we're still having appointments fairly regularly. So there's still a sense that there's surveillance happening, and even though a lot of anxiety happens during this time, because for many it's like you don't really know, well, is it over, is it not over? There's that sense of uncertainty and not knowing. So there can be a lot of, again, concern about these upcoming appointments, these upcoming scans, and it's anxiety making. Then Mullins has what he calls permanent survivorship. What he means by this is that after a period of time, the appointments become less, you may not be followed much at all, you start to feel as though, I think that I might be okay, maybe. And that can be the beginning of that sense of what he deemed permanent survivorship. Because you feel as though, hey, what now and what next is going to happen, and you start more going into your life, entering back into things or changing things, but it's a very, very different phase, and one that I think oftentimes feels like a great relief. Even though I will say that I truly believe that when you're given a diagnosis of cancer, there's that shadow that lingers in the room. However, in permanent survivorship, I feel that shadow is not right in your face. It can be further and further away, and that may be a sign that you are now in, again, what Mullins called permanent survivorship. And then in 1985, a psychologist, Dr. Kenneth Miller, in 2008, 1985, he updated some of Mullins' concepts to fit the new era of, and this is our 2008, so now things have changed even more. But at this point, there was more surveillance, there were more tests, there were more ways that preventative tests and things were happening for cancer. So treatments start to change. So what Miller says, he changed acute survivorship and made survivorship starting at the end of treatment, which he calls transitional survivorship, which he means at the end of treatment, or again for those who have finished a more perhaps active treatment, but now will be followed in some kind of treatment, likely for the rest of their lives. Transitional survivorship, again, a time of confusion, a lot of fears, anxieties, because you have finished, yet that finishing can seem very unclear to people. And I often ask people, well, do you feel like a survivor, or when do you feel like a survivor? Or do you even feel like one? Because you're still going through so much at that time. I also find that during the transitional survivorship phase, as Miller coins it, this can be a good time to start looking at the emotional aspects of what have happened to you. I don't really think that's possible very much while you're in treatment. You're too much focused on doing the treatments, oftentimes not feeling well, and that's not a great time to go into more of a reflective space. But this can happen when transitional survivorship phase begins. He also talks about extended survivorship and has it similar to Mullins, where a time of waiting, watching, test, scans, but they begin to get less and less, more time in between, and so on. But it's also a time when it can feel very insecure and uncertain. So I think that's very important to remember, that this doesn't all of a sudden end. And I think for many, there's a pressure. Okay, it's over. Get on with it. You're done. And it often doesn't feel that way. And I can imagine that many, if not most of you who are listening, experience this. Miller also has the permanent survivorship phase. Again, the phase where you begin to feel as though life is going to go on. The fears begin to slow down, the anxieties begin to slow down, there's more a sense of confidence, there's more of a sense that you have found yourself where you are now. So that is what he calls permanent survivorship also. Well, for me, at this point in my life, I'm not too clear about permanence. I just really question whether it even exists at all. So I use the phrase impermanent survivorship, because I feel we're all dealing with impermanence. But if you've had a cancer diagnosis and gone through oftentimes grueling treatments, or may still be on grueling treatments, your sense of permanence really gets shaken. And it's not different from what's actually true, but I think that there's a different feeling of it for those of us who have gotten that ding. So I like the phrase impermanence and impermanent survivorship. And I also feel that impermanence, in beginning to lean up against impermanence, we can find quite a sense of freedom and movement in our lives, and learn that we often aren't in control. We have choice, we can be in charge, but we often aren't in control. And there's great learning, and I think, again, great freedom in that. There are universal themes in survivorship. You find them on, I'm sure you've taken some of those distress screening forms, or you read about them in articles or see them on the internet. There are universal themes that join us all together. The first one, and this is interesting, this is the one that often comes up as number one on the distress screening or what people talk about, is living with uncertainty. And that quality of, now I'm living with uncertainty. I was just looking at some forms the other day, and these people were asked, what is your status now? And by and large, almost everyone entered, I don't know. Even though on the question before, they were NED, no evidence of disease. So there was still that sense of, I don't know, I really don't know, and it's that sense of living with uncertainty. Right bumping up against that, of course, is the fear of recurrence, which lives very deeply in the hearts of anyone who has been diagnosed with cancer. That also is an uncertainty. You feel like you don't really know, and those fears can be very devastating. They can be they can take us to places in our minds and in our hearts that can produce a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. So fear of recurrence. Trauma. Even though life-threatening illness is, for some reason, which I don't know why, is not considered going through a trauma anymore diagnostically, I certainly think that the trauma of having a cancer diagnosis, the trauma of some of the treatments, the traumas that we undergo are very real and have a need to be understood and worked with and dealt with. I also believe that the traumas can be healed and that we're not, caught forever in that cycle of trauma. Identity struggles can come up. Who am I now? I thought I was going this way. Suddenly I'm going this way. My body may have changed. My life may have changed. How I feel has changed. I don't know, in some senses, who I am anymore. And I've heard this a lot from people, that they have this sense of, who am I now that I'm someone that has had cancer? And that's an important exploration, an important search that we can also lean into. Body image issues. Very important. Oftentimes our bodies have undergone surgeries, there may be scars, there may be all kinds of issues with the body, some visible and some invisible, that we now walk through the world with and have to feel like, how do we cope with how I feel in my body and about my body? Loss. There are certainly losses. Oftentimes one of the most significant losses is this loss of a feeling that we're immortal. And boy, does a life-threatening illness just takes that right away. And so there's a loss of that. There can be a loss of how you feel about yourself. There can be a loss of confidence, certainly physical losses. So loss is another theme that you find in people who have had this diagnosis. Quality of life. Unfortunately, quality of life can take a serious dive during these times. I'm not going to go a lot into the financial toxicity that can occur because I'm going to be mostly dealing with the emotional and psychosocial issues of survivorship, but I do feel it is very important to mention that the financial issues that can occur with a diagnosis of cancer can be devastating. So there's the financial issues that affect the quality of life and so on. The quality of your relationships, sometimes partnerships, and so on can really struggle through this. So quality of life is an important part to look at. Anxiety, scans, tests, appointments, and so on. Popularly known as scanxiety. It's very real, and I want to normalize it. I think it's very important that we all know that, yes, that's natural to feel, and not to feel judgmental of yourself, or if others feel a little bit judgmental, a little bit rushing you along, to just, you can feel inside yourself, hey, this is a natural feeling. It's okay for me to have the anxiety about what I'm going through. Depression can also happen. And I'm going to separate depression from grief and sadness. Depression can be when you can check out, you can shut down, you can disconnect from yourself. And that also seems very natural for something like this to have happened and for you to get disconnected from yourself and have a sense of depression. Again, natural and not to feel judgmental about. but to know that both anxiety and depression, we're not stuck there. There are ways that we can help ourselves and get helped with those places within ourselves and in our lives. And we're going to be looking at some of those simple tools. I really believe a lot in things that are doable. Most of us have lives where we need something that's doable. We may not have, it would be great to go off to the health spa and spend a couple months there, but that's not very realistic for most of us. So we need to find ways in our lives that we can take care of ourselves, we nurture ourselves, we soothe what's going on, and we can do it in ways that feel simple and as easy as possible.